This is Miss Diorama. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this paint rack for these 18mm hobby paint bottles from the Army Painter. You may have seen some of the other paint racks that I've made, but I needed one that would fit nicely in the corner of my desk. So I designed a modular one that's made up of 3 sections. The 3 sections together will hold up to 108 paints. More sections can always be added if needed. In case you're interested, this design and many of my other designs are available from my shop, but most of my designs are made for laser cutting. And you will need a laser cutter if you want to make this paint rack for yourself. If you're not into laser cutting though, I hope this video can still inspire you in some way. Now I'll show you how it was made. I started the process by making some planetary gears. A Lazy Susan could also be used in this situation and would be a good low-cost alternative, but I'd prefer not to spend money if I can create something using materials that I already have. So I hear you asking, why planetary gears then? Planetary gears are preferred in certain situations for their high torque density, meaning they can deliver or handle high torque in a compact, efficient design. They are durable and versatile, making them ideal for applications like this one where space and weight are constraints. For this project I've chosen to use 3mm thick MDF and some 8mm round dowel that I had left over from one of my other paint rack projects. These 3 small cogs are the planet gears. This whole setup gets the name planetary gears because the center gear is like the sun, and the smaller gears rotate around it like planets within the outer ring, which is their orbit. This is the sun gear. These 3 rings make up the outer ring that will house the entire system. This bracket holds the planet gears in place, also allowing them to rotate. Glue is applied only to the bracket, enabling the planet cogs to still be able to spin freely. These pieces will make up some risers that will be glued in place around the outside of the outer ring. With that done, I gathered the parts to make 2 more planetary gears. These ones are slightly different than the previous one. Rather than the 3 layers, the cogs will only have a single layer this time around. This was kind of due to space constraints, but I also wanted to experiment with 1-layered cogs to see if they work as well as 3-layered cogs. I started by partially assembling the brackets for the planet cogs. Then I glued the dowels, which were shorter this time, into the middle of the planet cogs. Once the glue was dry, I placed the planet cogs into position and finished assembling the brackets that hold them in place. You may notice I'm constantly testing to make sure the rotating parts can move freely. While the glue was drying on the brackets, in the same way as for the first planetary gear, I assembled risers and added them to the outer rings. I also assembled the center axles that will enable each of the systems to rotate. I decided to paint this rack, and I also thought it might be best to paint some of the parts prior to assembly. For this, I used a matte black acrylic spray paint. I really was not happy with the matte black finish, so I later recoated everything visible to the eye with a satin black. When the paint was dry, I began assembling the planetary gears around the center axles. One of these circular pieces attaches underneath to the bottom of the center axle. This piece is glued to the axle, but not to the gear bracket. The sun cog is then moved into position. And is held in place by two more of these circular pieces. Just a warning, depending on the type of paint you use, this might be more difficult when the parts are pre-painted. And the final planetary gear is assembled. With that done, I moved on to making the rotating shelves for the paints. I gathered some of the parts that I'll need and painted them black. These two pieces will make up the center axle that this shelf will spin on. If you've got a keen eye for detail, you may have noticed and may also be wondering why the three center axles are all different lengths. To be honest, I'm not sure exactly why myself, except that I actually like this detail because it makes my paint rack truly unique. And maybe for no other reason that I decided to make the gear setup thicker for the bottom shelf. But really, there's only millimeters of difference between the lengths of all three axles. But this does need to be mentioned because it affects the way this rack should be assembled. These two pieces are glued together while making sure the cross in the center is aligned properly. This is so that the center axle can be inserted through the shelf later. I'll call this part the paint bottle separator. A cover piece is glued over the top of it, while again making sure the cross in the center is aligned properly. These two shelf parts are now ready for some risers to be glued into place. The excess glue is wiped away. Now the shelf parts can be put together. More glue is added first. It's important when attaching the two parts together to ensure the cross in the centre is aligned properly. Each one of the risers needs to be eased into the corresponding hollow. The two parts will eventually come together with a little patience. The centre axle is introduced through the middle of the shelf assembly. Again, depending on what type of paint is used, this can be more difficult to do after painting because the paint may cause resistance. Before attaching the planetary gear, I attach two circular pieces onto the end of the central axle. In the case of this first shelf, the centre axle needs to extend from the base by 21mm, which is a total of 7 3mm thicknesses. That will allow the whole gear assembly plus the final piece to fit perfectly in line with the end of the centre axle. The circular piece can be glued to the end of the centre axle but not to the gear system. Everything appears to be working nicely. This is where the outer ring piece belongs, but before it can be glued in place on the base, it needs a coat of paint because you will catch glimpses of it as the shelf spins. With that done, this smaller ring is glued in place on the base. Once the glue has been allowed to dry, the outer ring can be glued in place. To get it in the correct position, I place the gear mechanism into the middle of the ring, then place the centre axle into the smaller ring on the base. That way, it is exactly where it needs to be, but I'm also mindful of making sure the risers on the outer ring are positioned neatly as well. As there are two more shelves, I will align them in the same way. You'll see why this is important later. I thought I'd quickly show you what this first shelf is like in action, loaded with paints. This is where the planetary gears truly do their job, carrying all these paint bottles. With that, it was time to gather and paint more of the parts that will make up this paint rack, including the rear side pieces, some more shelves, and the front side pieces, and the rest of the parts for the shelves. The shelves were assembled in the same way as demonstrated earlier. If you want to see this process in more detail again, go back to where you would have seen me put the first shelf together. As mentioned earlier, pre-painting parts can cause some resistance during assembly. To combat this, you could always paint after assembly, but painting after assembly can be tricky. Trying to get paint where it should go, while also trying not to get it where it shouldn't go. For example, where it could cause problems if it got into the gears. This is where it was important to align the risers on the gear systems for the second and third shelves with the ones on the first shelf. Align the small circle at this end of the axle with the centre of the ring on the shelf. Doing this will make certain the outer ring will be in the correct position when gluing. While the glue was drying on those parts, I gathered the pieces needed for the next step. The piece for the top of the shelf was painted on the underside. A circular piece was placed on the top end of each of the centre axles. These should be glued on. A small ring was glued in place on the underside of the top piece. A small ring was also glued on the underside of the second and third shelves. You may be able to see that these shelves are engraved on both sides with the same reference markings. To do this, once the first side is engraved and cut, I simply turn these pieces over in their exact same position on the laser bed to engrave the other side, being careful not to move the pieces while doing so. That way I can't go wrong with the positioning of all the parts. The paint rack could now be assembled. As mentioned before, if you've got a keen eye for detail, you may have noticed the 3 centre axles are all different lengths. For that reason, it's important to make sure each shelf goes in the correct order. The first one is the one with the thicker planetary gear system. The second one is the one with the shortest axle. And the third, well, that's the last one that's left. Clamps were put in place to ensure secure connections between the pieces. Everything appears to be working nicely. It was now time to assemble the other 2 sections. First, I gathered the parts for the back, sides, top and bottom and painted them. Then I gathered the parts for one of the shelves, which I also painted. Once the paint was dry, the shelf was assembled. By the way, you can save on paint by only painting parts on the sides that will be seen. I say this because I ended up using quite a lot of paint. And that was because I felt that painting on this MDF required several coats for it to look any good, and because there are just so many parts to paint. With these shelves though, you will need to paint some of the parts on both sides. The backs of these shelves you can leave unpainted because they won't be seen. Once assembled, the shelf looks a little bit shabby, but that will be fixed with another coat of paint at the end. The shelf fits perfectly into these slots on the side piece. The other side piece will be attached later when all of the shelves are in place. 5 more shelves were assembled in the same way as the first one. They were then attached with glue to the side piece as well. other side piece was then attached to the opposite side of the shelves. As you can see, I haven't painted the outer sides of these shelf sections, and this was completely on purpose. This paint rack with its different sections is a modular design, meaning that you can put the different sections together in different combinations. And therefore, the decision of whether to paint, cover, or do nothing with the outer surfaces can be decided later. With both the sides now attached, clamps were put in place to help ensure a secure connection between the pieces. Once the glue was dry, the back piece was attached. This was followed by the top and bottom pieces. With that done, I repeated the same steps to make another identical section. This is what all three of the sections look like in the arrangement that I'll be using. All of the sections had another coat of paint added. Then finally, my Army Painter paints were loaded into the rack. And as a finishing touch, I added some pine cover panels to all of the exposed outer surfaces of the rack. This was tinted with a wood stain. Of course, if extra sections were added to this setup, any cover panels would also need to be altered to suit the new setup. Alternatively, rather than using cover panels, you could just simply paint any outer surfaces that will be seen. Anyway, I was really pleased with this new paint rack, and as you can see, it's very easy to access the paint bottles. I especially love it because I can always add more sections to it later. I really enjoy designing things like this, and I enjoy making them even more. I hope you also enjoyed watching me put this rack together, and if you did, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel. And as mentioned earlier, in case you're interested, this design and many of my other designs are available from my shop. But most of my designs are made for laser cutting, meaning they'll only really work in laser cutting software, and you will need a laser cutter if you want to make this paint rack for yourself. After this, go check out this video where I show you how to make a little corner module that's perfect for setting up a small project-specific palette. Thanks for watching. Bye for now, and I hope to see you next time.